My daughter excused herself to the bathroom during dinner. The waiter whispered, "She slipped something into your drink." The waiter's breath was warm against my ear, his voice barely a whisper. "Ma'am, please don't drink that wine. Your daughter, she put something in it while you weren't looking." I froze. My hand suspended halfway to the glass of Merlot that Rachel had so thoughtfully ordered for me. The ambient noise of Marcello's Italian bistro, the soft jazz, the murmur of conversations, the gentle clinking of silverware seemed to fade into a distant hum. My eyes locked on the burgundy liquid, its surface catching the candlelight between us, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The young waiter straightened up, his face carefully neutral as he pretended to adjust the placement of my water glass. "I saw her," he continued in that same urgent whisper, "when she came back from the restroom. She leaned over your glass. I was bringing bread to table 7, and I had a clear view. She dropped something into your wine." My heart hammered against my rib cage. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible misunderstanding. Rachel was my daughter, my only child, the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard, who cried when I was sick, who called me every Sunday without fail. "Are you certain?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking. The waiter's eyes met mine, and I saw genuine fear there. "Yes, ma'am. I'm positive. I've been working here 5 years. I know what I saw." Rachel's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Everything okay here?" I looked up to see my daughter sliding back into her seat across from me, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile bright and expectant. She looked beautiful in that navy dress I'd complimented earlier. She looked exactly like the daughter I thought I knew. "Just fine," the waiter said smoothly, his professionalism snapping back into place. "I was letting your mother know about tonight's dessert special. Tiramisu, made fresh this afternoon." "Oh, Mom would love that," Rachel said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her touch was warm, affectionate. "Wouldn't you, Mom?" I stared at her, at this woman I'd carried for 9 months, raised for 42 years, and supposedly knew better than anyone in the world. Her green eyes, my eyes, the same shade I saw in the mirror every morning, gazed back at me with apparent tenderness. "Sure, sweetheart," I heard myself say. "That sounds lovely." The waiter gave me one last significant look before he retreated, and I was left alone with my daughter and a glass of poisoned wine. Let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here, to this white tablecloth restaurant on a Thursday evening in October. To this moment where everything I believed about my life shattered like dropped crystal. My name is Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, a widow of 7 years, and until approximately 3 minutes ago, I considered myself a woman who understood her life. I'd been married to David for 39 years before lung cancer took him. We'd built a comfortable life in Willow Creek, Connecticut, a 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Drive, paid off 15 years ago. David had been a successful architect, and I'd worked as a high school English teacher until I retired at 62. We'd had one child, Rachel Ann Whitmore, born on a snowy December morning in 1982, 3 years after a miscarriage that nearly destroyed me. She was our miracle, our everything. Perhaps we spoiled her. Perhaps we held on too tight. But she was all we had, and we loved her fiercely. Rachel grew up privileged, but not, we thought, entitled. She went to good schools, had nice things, but we made sure she worked for her achievements. She graduated from Boston University with a degree in marketing, married a man named Derek Walsh when she was 28, and they had 2 children, Emma, now 12, and Lucas, 10, my grandchildren. 2 more reasons I loved Rachel beyond measure. But if I'm being honest, and at this point, what's the use in anything else? There'd been signs. Small things I'd explained away because mothers want to believe the best of their children. After David died, Rachel became more attentive. She started calling daily instead of weekly. She'd drive up from Stamford, just 40 minutes away, to check on me at least twice a week. She helped me sort through David's belongings, held my hand through the grief, made sure I ate when I couldn't bring myself to cook. I was grateful. I told all my friends at the book club how lucky I was to have such a devoted daughter. But then the question started. Mom, have you thought about updating your will? Mom, you really should add me to your bank accounts. You know, just in case something happens. Mom, Derek thinks you should consider selling this big house. It's too much for you to maintain alone. I brushed it off. She was worried about me. That was natural, wasn't it? After all, I was getting older. I was alone now. It made sense that she'd want to make sure I was taken care of, that my affairs were in order. Then came the incident with the pills. It was 6 months ago, late April. I'd had a bad bout of insomnia and mentioned it during one of Rachel's visits. A week later, she showed up with a bottle of sleeping pills. "The doctor I know recommended these," she'd said. "They're much better than that over-the-counter stuff you've been taking." I took them for 3 nights. By the 3rd night, I could barely get out of bed the next morning. I was dizzy, disoriented, and when I tried to stand, my legs nearly gave out. I'd called my actual doctor, Dr. Patterson, who I'd been seeing for 20 years. When I described the pills, small, white, with no markings, he'd been alarmed. "Margaret, I didn't prescribe those. And without seeing them, I can't tell you what they are, but those symptoms concern me. Stop taking them immediately." When I'd confronted Rachel about it, she'd seemed genuinely surprised. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I must have grabbed the wrong bottle from Derek's medicine cabinet. He takes medication for his back. God, I feel terrible." I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? It was an honest mistake. People make mistakes. But now, sitting in this restaurant with poisoned wine between us, all those little moments were rearranging themselves in my mind like puzzle pieces I'd been refusing to see as part of a larger, darker picture. The time she'd offered to make me tea, and I'd felt nauseous for hours afterward. The way she'd been pressing me to sign new financial documents, ones her lawyer friend had drawn up. How she'd seemed almost disappointed when I'd recovered quickly from a bad fall last winter. The increased frequency of her visits, always with some new form I needed to sign, some new arrangement that would make things easier for me. "Mom, you're staring at your wine." Rachel's voice pulled me back to the present. She was looking at me with what appeared to be concern. Her brow furrowed in that familiar way that had always made me want to smooth the worry from her face. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here she was, expressing concern for my well-being after just attempting to what? Drug me? Poison me? Kill me? The word hit me like a physical blow. Kill. My daughter was trying to kill me. "I'm fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Just felt a little lightheaded for a moment. Maybe I should drink some water first. I reached for my water glass, hyper-aware of every movement Rachel made. She relaxed slightly, leaning back in her chair. "You've been doing too much," she said softly. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. Derek and I have been discussing it, and we really think it's time you considered moving into assisted living. Nothing extreme, one of those nice retirement communities. They have beautiful apartments, social activities, medical staff on site." My fingers tightened around my water glass. "We've had this conversation, Rachel. I'm perfectly capable of living in my own home. But are you?" She leaned forward, her voice taking on a pleading quality. "Mom, you're almost 70. You're living alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's there to help you? I'm 68 and I'm in excellent health. Dr. Patterson says I have the vitals of someone 10 years younger." Still, Rachel's jaw set in that stubborn way I recognized from her childhood tantrums. "We worry about you. I worry about you. And honestly, Mom, it would give us all peace of mind if you were somewhere safe, somewhere we knew you were being looked after. Somewhere you could control me," I thought. "Somewhere you could control my money, my assets, my life, because that's what this was about, wasn't it? The estate David and I had built over 4 decades. The house worth close to $900,000 in today's market. The retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, the life insurance payout I'd received after David's death. Altogether, I was worth just over $2 million. Not wealthy by some standards, but more than comfortable. And Rachel was my sole heir. But apparently, she didn't want to wait for me to die naturally. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready for that step. Not yet." Rachel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, we don't have to decide tonight. Let's just enjoy our dinner." She lifted her own wine glass, a Pinot Grigio, I noted, different from my Merlot, and took a sip. "You haven't touched yours. Don't you like it?" I specifically asked the sommelier for a wine you'd enjoy. "Oh, I'm sure you did," I thought. "I'm sure you planned this very carefully." "I'm just not in the mood for red tonight," I said. Would you mind if I ordered something else? A flash of something crossed Rachel's face. Annoyance? Frustration? But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. Of course not, Mom. Whatever you want. The waiter materialized at our table as if he'd been watching, waiting. Everything all right with the wine, ma'am? Actually, I'd prefer a white wine instead. What would you recommend? His eyes met mine with understanding. Might I suggest a sparkling water with lemon instead? We have an excellent selection of mineral waters. Perhaps something lighter would pair better with your meal. Smart man, I thought. Very smart man. That sounds perfect. Rachel watched this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. The waiter removed my wine glass, and I felt a small surge of relief as the poisoned liquid disappeared from the table. So, Mom, Rachel said once we were alone again, her voice determinedly cheerful, I was thinking we could go shopping this weekend. There's a sale at Nordstrom, and you could use some new clothes for the winter. We fell into small talk. The kind of surface conversation mothers and daughters have 1,000 times. She told me about Emma's soccer team, about Lucas's struggles with algebra, about Derek's upcoming business trip to Chicago. I responded automatically, my mind racing beneath the veneer of normalcy. What was I going to do? Should I confront her here, in public? Should I leave, make an excuse about not feeling well? Should I call the police? And what would I tell them? That my daughter put something in my wine? Based on what the word of a waiter? They'd want evidence. They'd want proof. And all I had was a young man's whispered warning and years of accumulated suspicions that I'd been willfully ignoring. The realization settled over me like a cold weight. I was in danger. Real danger, from the person I loved most in the world, and I had no idea how to save myself without destroying her. Our meals arrived: chicken piccata for me, seafood linguine for Rachel. The food looked beautiful, but my appetite had vanished. Still, I forced myself to take bites, to maintain the pretense that everything was fine, that I hadn't just discovered my daughter was capable of attempting murder, because that's what this was. Not a prank, not a mistake. Murder. The word kept echoing in my head as I watched Rachel eat her pasta, as she told a funny story about Lucas's science project, as she laughed that familiar laugh I'd heard since she was a baby. How long had she been planning this? Had the sleeping pills been an earlier attempt? The tea that made me sick? How many times had my own daughter tried to end my life? And why now? What had changed? Was she in financial trouble? Did Derek not know? Were my grandchildren part of this? The questions spiraled, each one more horrifying than the last. Mom, you're barely eating. I looked down at my plate. I'd been pushing the chicken around without really consuming any of it. I think I might be coming down with something, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach was churning with anxiety and horror. Do you want to go home? I can drive you. No. The word came out too sharply, and I softened it. No. Thank you, sweetheart. I drove myself. I'll be fine. The thought of being alone in a car with Rachel, of being taken back to my house where no one would witness what might happen, sent a spike of pure fear through me. Rachel frowned. You really don't look well. Maybe you shouldn't be driving. I insist let me take you home. Derek can come get me later and we'll retrieve your car tomorrow. Rachel. I said no. We looked at each other across the table, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. I saw something in her eyes: calculation, frustration, a coldness that made her suddenly look like a stranger. Then it was gone, replaced by hurt and concern. I'm just trying to help, Mom. I worry about you. I know you do, honey, but I'm capable of driving 10 minutes home. The waiter appeared again, his timing impeccable. How was everything? Wonderful, Rachel said, her smile back in place. But I think we'll skip dessert. Can we just get the check? Of course. He turned to me. And ma'am, our manager wanted to make sure you enjoyed your meal. If there's anything at all you need, please don't hesitate to ask. Anything at all. The emphasis was subtle but clear. He was giving me an out, a lifeline if I needed it. Thank you, I said quietly. You've been very attentive. As he walked away, Rachel pulled out her credit card. Let me get this. It was supposed to be my treat anyway. That's very kind of you. We sat in uncomfortable silence while we waited for the check. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, studying me, trying to determine if I knew. If the waiter had said something. If her plan had been exposed. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to ask how she could do this to me. But another part, the mother part that had loved her unconditionally for 42 years, still couldn't quite believe it was real. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe. But I wasn't wrong. I knew I wasn't wrong. The waiter returned with the check, and Rachel signed the receipt with a flourish. We gathered our things, my purse, her coat, and walked toward the exit. Every step felt surreal, like I was moving through water, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. In the parking lot, under the glow of the streetlights, Rachel turned to me. Are you sure you won't let me drive you home? I really don't feel comfortable with you driving when you're not feeling well. I'm fine. Rachel, really? She stepped closer, and I had to fight the instinct to step back. She wrapped her arms around me in a hug, and I mechanically hugged her back, feeling the terrible disconnect between the physical warmth of her embrace and the icy knowledge of what she'd just tried to do. I love you, Mom, she whispered into my hair. I love you too, sweetheart. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe I did still love her, even now. Maybe that was the tragedy of it, that love didn't just switch off, even when it should. We separated, and Rachel walked to her silver Lexus while I headed to my Honda. I waited, engine running, watching her drive away. Only when her taillights disappeared around the corner did I let my hand start shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't drive home. Instead, I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to steady my breathing, trying to figure out what to do next. Finally, I pulled out my phone and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called the police. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, trained to handle panic. I wasn't panicking, not outwardly, at least. My voice came out steady, almost detached, as I explained what had happened. A waiter had witnessed my daughter tampering with my drink. No, I hadn't consumed any of it. Yes, I was safe. Yes, I was still at the location. 2 patrol officers arrived within 15 minutes. I watched their cruiser pull into the parking lot, its lights mercifully off, no siren to draw attention. I'd been worried about making a scene, about the humiliation of this becoming public, but the officers were discreet. Officer Martinez was in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her partner, Officer Chen, was younger, maybe late 20s, with a notebook already in hand. They listened to my story in the front seat of my Honda, their expressions growing more serious with each detail. Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Martinez said when I'd finished, do you still have the wine glass? Did the restaurant keep it? My heart sank. No. The waiter removed it when I ordered water instead. I didn't think. I was just trying to act normal, to not let Rachel know that I knew. That's understandable, she said gently. You were in shock. But without the glass or its contents, we don't have physical evidence of tampering. The waiter saw her do it. He's a witness, and we'll absolutely talk to him. But Mrs. Whitmore, I need to be honest with you about how these cases work. Officer Martinez's tone was kind but firm. We need more than a witness statement to pursue criminal charges. We'd need to prove what substance was used, that it was harmful, and that your daughter had intent to cause you harm. Without the drink itself, that's going to be very difficult. The reality of the situation crashed over me. I'd thrown away my evidence. The wine was gone, likely already washed down a drain in the restaurant's kitchen. All I had was a story. However, Officer Chun interjected, looking up from his notes. What you've described, the sleeping pills incident, the pattern of pressure to change your financial arrangements, tonight's event, it could suggest a broader pattern of elder abuse or attempted financial exploitation. Those we can investigate. Elder abuse. The term made me flinch. I was a victim. My own daughter had made me a victim. What do I do now? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. First, you go home and make sure you're somewhere safe tonight, Officer Martinez said. Do you have anyone who can stay with you? A friend? Another family member? I thought of my sister Linda in Florida, my friend Patricia from book club, my neighbor George, who'd been checking on me since David died. But involving any of them meant explaining, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I'll be fine. I have good locks. A security system. Officer Martinez didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Okay, tomorrow, I want you to do several things. First, contact your bank and any financial institutions where your daughter has access or knowledge of your accounts. Put fraud alerts on everything. Second, schedule an appointment with an elder law attorney. Third, consider changing your locks if Rachel has keys to your house. The practicality of it all made it real. I was preparing to defend myself against my own child. We'll file a report tonight, Officer Chun added. It'll be on record, and we'll interview the waiter, get his statement. Mrs. Whitmore, if you think of anything else, any other incidents that seemed odd or concerning, write them down. Dates, times, what happened. Build a timeline. Will you? I hesitated. Will you contact Rachel? Question her? The officers exchanged glances. Not immediately, Officer Martinez said. Right now, we don't have enough for that, but this report exists. If anything else happens, if there are any other attempts or incidents, we have documentation of a pattern. That becomes very important. They took my detailed statement, wrote down everything I could remember, and gave me a case number. Then they followed me home, waiting in my driveway until I was safely inside with the alarm set before they drove away. The house felt different that night. The colonial that had been my haven for 33 years suddenly seemed full of shadows and echoes. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I checked every window lock twice, tested the alarm system 3 times, and dragged a chair in front of my bedroom door before I finally tried to sleep. I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in the darkness and thought about Rachel, my baby girl, who I'd rocked through countless nightmares, who I'd taught to read and ride a bike and stand up for herself. Where had it gone wrong? When had she stopped being my daughter and become someone capable of murder? At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my office. David's old desk sat in the corner, still covered with his architectural drawings that I'd never been able to put away. I opened my laptop and started writing, just as Officer Chun had suggested. A timeline. The sleeping pills incident, April 2024. The tea that made me nauseous, February 2024. The first conversation about moving to assisted living, December 2023. Rachel. Being added to my checking account, just in case, November 2023. The more I wrote, the further back the pattern went. The pressure had been building for over a year, subtle at first, then increasingly insistent. And I'd been blind to it, or perhaps willfully ignorant, because acknowledging it meant acknowledging something unbearable. When dawn finally broke, gray and cold through my bedroom window, I'd filled 7 pages with incidents. 7 pages of evidence that my daughter had been systematically working toward something. Tonight had just been the most overt attempt. At 8:30, I called my bank. Jennifer, the manager I'd worked with for years, listened with growing alarm as I explained that I needed to remove my daughter's access to my accounts and set up fraud alerts. Mrs. Whitmore, has there been suspicious activity? Not yet, but I need to protect myself. Can you check, has Rachel made any transactions I should know about? There was a pause, the sound of typing. Then Jennifer's voice returned, carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore, I think you should come in. There are some things we should discuss in person. My stomach dropped. What kind of things? I'd rather not say over the phone. Can you come in today? I'll clear my schedule. I was at the bank within the hour. Jennifer's office was a small, glass-walled room that suddenly felt like a confessional. She pulled up my accounts on her computer screen and turned the monitor so I could see. 3 weeks ago, Rachel came in with a power of attorney document, Jennifer said quietly. She said you'd signed it, that you wanted her to have authority to manage your finances because you were having some memory issues. I asked to call you to confirm, but she said you were at a doctor's appointment and she'd have you call me later. I never signed any power of attorney. My voice was ice. I suspected as much when you called this morning. Mrs. Whitmore, she's been moving money. Small amounts at first, 1,000 here, 1,500 there. Transfers to an account in her name. Over the past 3 weeks, She's moved nearly $40,000. The room spun. $40,000. The power of attorney, do you still have it? Jennifer pulled a file from her drawer and slid it across the desk. I stared at the document, at the signature that was supposed to be mine. It was close. Very close, but the loop in the W was wrong, and I always added a small flourish to the final E that was missing here. That's not my signature, I said. She forged it. I was afraid of that. Jennifer's face was grim. Mrs. Whitmore, this is bank fraud and forgery. You need to report this to the police immediately. I already have. Last night. Different incident, but same person. I spent 2 hours at the bank, filing fraud claims, closing and reopening accounts, setting up new security measures that Rachel wouldn't be able to circumvent. Jennifer made copies of everything, including the forged power of attorney, for my records and for the police. When I finally left, I felt simultaneously empowered and devastated. I had evidence now, real, tangible proof of Rachel's intentions. But having that proof meant accepting that this was truly happening, that my daughter was truly capable of this. My next stop was the office of Gerald Hutchins, an elder law attorney that Patricia had recommended when her own mother had needed help with estate planning. Gerald was in his 60s, with silver hair and a calm, grandfatherly presence that immediately put me at ease, until I told him my story. Then his expression darkened. Margaret, what you're describing is financial elder abuse with an attempted component of physical harm, he said bluntly. This is serious. Very serious. The forgery alone is a felony. If we can prove the attempted poisoning, we're looking at attempted murder. Hearing it stated so plainly made my hands shake. Gerald pushed a box of tissues across his desk. I need to ask you something difficult, he continued. Is it possible Rachel is in financial trouble? Gambling debts? Drug use? Sometimes people we think we know well are hiding significant problems. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I knew everything about her life, but clearly I don't. With your permission, I'd like to hire a private investigator, someone who can look into Rachel's finances, her activities, build a comprehensive picture. If this goes to court and Margaret, it should go to court, we need to understand motive. I thought about my grandchildren, Emma and Lucas. If Rachel went to prison, what would happen to them? Derek worked long hours. Could he manage alone? Would they blame me for destroying their mother? But then I thought about the wine glass at Marcello's, about what would have happened if I'd taken even one sip. Would I have collapsed at the restaurant? Would I have made it home before whatever drug took effect? Would Rachel have called 911, playing the concerned daughter? Or would she have watched me die? Hire the investigator, I said. Gerald made a call, and within hours I was meeting with Marcus Webb, a former police detective who now ran a small private investigation firm. Marcus was in his early 50s, soft-spoken but with sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to be frank with you, he said after I told him the abbreviated version. Cases like this, family members attempting to harm elderly parents for inheritance, they're more common than most people realize, and they follow predictable patterns. Your daughter has already shown several of them: isolation, financial manipulation, and now apparent poisoning. The question is whether this is opportunistic or planned. What's the difference? Opportunistic means she saw a chance and took it. Planned means she's been building toward this for a long time, which suggests a level of calculation that makes her much more dangerous. He paused. Either way, you did the right thing by contacting authorities and getting legal help. Now I need you to give me access to everything. Your financial records, your medical records, any documentation of Rachel's involvement in your life. The more information I have, the clearer picture I can build. Over the next week, I lived in a strange state of suspended animation. I went through my daily routines, the grocery store, the library, my Tuesday morning yoga class, but everything felt hollow and surreal. I was waiting for Marcus to find something, waiting for Rachel to call, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rachel did call 3 days after the dinner. I stared at her name on my phone screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Finally, I accepted the call. Mom, I've been so worried. I've called you 4 times. Why haven't you answered? Her voice was bright, concerned, perfectly modulated. The voice of a loving daughter. I've been busy, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Are you feeling better? You seemed so off at dinner. I almost came by to check on you. The thought of Rachel coming to my house, of being alone with her, sent a chill down my spine. I'm fine. Just needed some rest. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Listen, I was thinking we should reschedule that shopping trip. Maybe this Saturday? We could make a day of it. Lunch at that cafe you like. She was trying to get me alone again. Away from my house. Away from witnesses. Somewhere she could try again. I'm not available this Saturday. A pause. Oh, okay. Well, how about next week sometime? Rachel, I need to ask you something. The words came out before I could stop them. Did you go to my bank 3 weeks ago with a power of attorney document? The silence that followed was profound. When Rachel spoke again, her voice had changed, lost its warmth. Mom, I was trying to help you. You've been so scattered lately, forgetting things. I thought if I could just handle some of the financial stress for you. I never signed that document. I never gave you permission. You did. You just don't remember. Mom, this is exactly what I've been worried about. You're having memory problems. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its boldness. My memory is fine, Rachel. I've had it checked. Dr. Patterson says I'm cognitively sound. Dr. Patterson is almost as old as you are. Maybe you need a second opinion. There it was, the mask slipping. The real Rachel, the one who saw me not as her mother but as an obstacle. I've closed that account, I said quietly. I've opened new ones. You no longer have access to my finances. Another long pause. I see. Her voice was cold now, all pretense gone. And I suppose you're going to make this difficult. You forged my signature. You stole $40,000 from me. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back. Were you going to pay it back before or after you killed me? The words hung in the air between us. I heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath. What are you talking about? The wine at Marcello's. What did you put in it, Rachel? What were you trying to do to me? You're insane. I didn't put anything in your wine. Mom, you need help. Serious help. You're having paranoid delusions. But her voice was shaking now, just slightly. Fear or maybe anger at being caught. A waiter saw you, Rachel. He saw you put something in my drink. I have a witness. I have a police report. And now I have evidence of bank fraud. So I'll ask you again, what were you trying to do to me? I'm not talking to you while you're like this. When you're ready to be rational, when you're ready to apologize for these insane accusations, you can call me. Until then, don't contact me. And you're not seeing Emma or Lucas. I won't have you filling their heads with this crazy nonsense. She hung up. I sat there with the dead phone in my hand, my heart pounding. She'd just confirmed everything. Not explicitly, but in the way she'd reacted, in the threats, in the attempt to turn my grandchildren against me. This was real. This was happening. And now Rachel knew that I knew, which meant, I realized with dawning horror, that I might be in more danger now than I'd been before. My phone rang again. For a second, I thought it was Rachel calling back. But it was Marcus Webb. Mrs. Whitmore, I've found something. Can you come to my office? You need to see this in person. Marcus Webb's office was in a modest building off Main Street, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Inside, it was neat and efficient file cabinets, a large desk, and 3 computer monitors that were all displaying different information when I arrived. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Sit down, Margaret. This is going to be difficult to hear. I sat, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. Marcus pulled his chair around the desk so we were sitting face to face, then handed me a folder. Your daughter and son-in-law are in serious financial trouble. And I mean serious. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts of documents, loan applications, credit card statements, legal notices. The numbers swam before my eyes. Derek lost his job 8 months ago, Marcus continued. He was working as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. He wasn't fired for cause. It was part of company-wide layoffs, but he hasn't found comparable work since. He's been doing consulting work, but it's sporadic and pays maybe a quarter of what he was making. Rachel never told me. I don't think Rachel wanted you to know, because here's where it gets worse. Marcus pointed to another document. 3 years ago, Derek convinced Rachel to invest heavily in a cryptocurrency venture. One of those too good to be true situations that, predictably, was exactly that. They lost $370,000. I felt physically sick. How is that possible? They mortgaged the house to make the investment. They were told they'd triple their money in 18 months. Instead, the whole thing collapsed. The people running it disappeared. It was essentially a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Marcus pulled out more papers. Rachel and Derek have been living on credit cards ever since. They're over $200,000 in debt beyond the mortgage. The house itself is underwater. They owe more than it's worth in the current market. The picture was becoming devastatingly clear. My successful daughter, my comfortable son-in-law, living in their beautiful Stanford home with their private school children, all of it was a facade built on crushing debt. There's more, Marcus said grimly. He turned one of his monitors toward me. I found Rachel's search history from her laptop. She's been careless about covering her tracks. On the screen was a list of Google searches, all time-stamped, how to dissolve sleeping pills in liquid, March 5th, 10th, 2024, undetectable poisons that cause heart attacks, March 22nd, 2024, how long does Zolpidem stay in system, April 3rd, 2024, natural causes death elderly, April 18th, 2024, inheritance tax Connecticut, May 2nd, 2024, average time for probate Connecticut, May 2nd, 2024, signs of dementia in elderly parent, June 10th, 2024, how to get power of attorney for parent, June 28th, 2024, the dates told a story. A cold, calculated timeline of premeditation. She's been planning this for at least 7 months, Marcus said quietly, maybe longer. These are just the searches I could recover from the past 6 months. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the folder down. The sleeping pills, that was her first real attempt, wasn't it? I believe so. When that didn't work, when you didn't die from what I'm guessing was an overdose of sleep medication, she started looking for other methods, less obvious ones. But why didn't I die? From the pills, I mean. Marcus leaned back in his chair. A few possibilities. You might not have taken enough consecutive doses. Your metabolism might have processed them differently than she expected. Or, and this is the most likely, you called your doctor when you started feeling wrong and you stopped taking them. If you'd continued for another week, 2 weeks, you might have. The thought made my throat close. I'd been days away from death, and I hadn't even known it. There's more, Marcus said, and I nearly laughed at the absurdity of that statement. How could there possibly be more? He handed me another document. 2 years ago, Derek took out a life insurance policy on you. I stared at the paper. It was a life insurance application, and there was my information, my birth date, my social security number, my medical history, all accurate. At the bottom was a signature that looked convincingly like mine. I never signed this. I know. The insurance company requires a medical exam for policies this size, and you would have remembered that. But look at the beneficiary. I looked. The policy was for $1 million, payable to Rachel Ann Walsh. They forged this too, I said numbly. How is this even possible? Don't insurance companies verify these things? They do, but the system isn't perfect. The medical exam was supposedly conducted at your home by a nurse practitioner. I'm guessing Rachel hired someone to pose as you, someone close enough in age and general health. For a fee, there are people who'll do that. The policy has been active and in good standing for 2 years. They've been paying the monthly premiums on time. So if I died, Rachel would get $1 million from the insurance company, plus my entire estate. The math was sickeningly simple. Plus, with you dead, no one to press charges for the bank fraud. The $40,000 she already took would just disappear into the estate settlement. She'd inherit the house, the investments, the retirement accounts, everything. Marcus's expression was grim. Margaret, your daughter wasn't just trying to kill you. She was trying to orchestrate the perfect financial murder. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the horror churning inside me. I walked to Marcus's window and stared out at the street below. A woman was pushing a stroller. A man was walking his dog. Normal people living normal lives. none of them knowing that their worlds could shatter in an instant. "Can we use this?" I asked. "The searches? The forged insurance policy? Can we prove attempted murder?" The search history alone establishes intent. Combined with the waiter's testimony about the wine, the forged insurance policy, and the pattern of financial abuse, yes, we have a case, a strong case. Marcus joined me at the window. "But Margaret, you need to understand something. Once we take this to the prosecutor, there's no going back. Rachel will be arrested. She'll likely face multiple felony charges, fraud, forgery, attempted murder. She could go to prison for 20 years or more. And if we don't, she'd try again. Women like Rachel, people this desperate, they don't stop. She's in too deep. The debt isn't going away. If anything, it's getting worse. Every month they miss payments, the hole gets deeper. You're not just her mother anymore. You're her only way out." I thought about Emma and Lucas. Sweet Emma, who wanted to be a veterinarian. Lucas, who was struggling with algebra and liked to draw superhero comics. What would this do to them? But then I thought about that wine glass, about waking up dead because my daughter had decided I was worth more deceased than alive. "Build a case," I said. "Take everything to the police, to the prosecutor. Whatever needs to happen." Marcus nodded. "I'll have a complete report ready by tomorrow. I've already been in touch with Officer Martinez. She's coordinating with the Financial Crimes Unit and the District Attorney's Office. With this evidence, they'll be able to move forward." How long before? I couldn't finish the sentence. "Before Rachel is arrested. Maybe a week. They'll want to coordinate with the insurance fraud investigators, make sure all the charges are filed together. But Margaret, until that happens, you need to be careful, very careful. Rachel knows you're onto her now. Cornered people do desperate things. What do you suggest? Don't be alone with her. Don't accept any food or drink from her. Consider staying with a friend for a few days or having someone stay with you. Install cameras if you don't have them already. And if Rachel shows up at your house, don't let her in. Call the police immediately." I left Marcus's office with the folder under my arm, feeling like I was carrying evidence of my own daughter's desire to see me dead. The afternoon sun was too bright, the world too normal for what I now knew. At home, I did what Marcus suggested. I called Patricia from book club, explained a heavily edited version of the situation, family issues with Rachel, need some support, and she immediately offered to come stay with me for a few days. I called a security company and scheduled an installation of additional cameras for the next morning. I checked every lock, every window, every point of entry. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at the photos. They covered the refrigerator, pinned up with magnets, Rachel's school pictures from kindergarten through high school. Rachel in her college graduation gown, Rachel on her wedding day, radiant in white. Rachel holding newborn Emma. Rachel laughing with Lucas at his birthday party. When had she changed? Or had she always been this person and I just refused to see it? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. _mom, it's me. Using Derek's phone because I know you're screening my calls. We need to talk. Please. I can explain everything. Come to the house tomorrow. 2 p.m. Just you and me. We can fix this. I love you. I stared at the message for a long time. Every maternal instinct I had wanted to believe it. Wanted to think that maybe, somehow, there was an explanation that would make this all make sense. But I'd seen the search history, the insurance policy, the bank statements. There was no explanation that could erase those. I forwarded the text to Marcus and Officer Martinez without responding. Marcus called me back within minutes. "Don't go. That's a setup." "I know." "Do you?" "Margaret, I'm serious. She wants you alone, in her house, where there are no witnesses. You cannot go." "I won't, I promise." But even as I said it, part of me wondered, what if I did go? What if I confronted her, face to face, made her look at me and admit what she'd done? What if I could somehow reach the daughter I used to know? That night, I barely slept again. Every sound made me jump. At 2 a.m, my security alarm chimed the sensor on my back gate. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone with shaking hands. A figure stood at my back gate, trying the lock. The camera's night vision turned everything green and grainy, but I could make out enough details. A woman, medium height, blonde hair, Rachel. I watched on the small screen as she tried the gate, then moved along the fence, checking for weaknesses. She walked the perimeter of my yard, testing windows, looking for entry points. She was careful, methodical. This wasn't a panicked visit. This was reconnaissance. After 15 minutes, she left. I heard a car engine start a few houses down. She hadn't even parked in my driveway. Didn't want the neighbors to see her car. I saved the footage and sent it to Marcus and Officer Martinez. Then I called 911. By the time the police arrived, Rachel was long gone. But now there was another report, another piece of evidence, another nail in the case being built against her. Officer Martinez looked exhausted when she took my statement. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to be honest with you. This is escalating. I'm recommending that the DF fast-track the arrest warrant. We can't wait a week. With this footage, with everything the PI found, we have enough to move now. How soon? Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. She hesitated. You should prepare yourself. This is going to become public very quickly. Your daughter will be arrested, likely at her home. There will be media attention. Cases like this, adult children trying to kill their parents for inheritance, they make headlines. I hadn't thought about that. About reporters, about strangers knowing my family's tragedy, about Emma and Lucas seeing their mother in handcuffs on the evening news. What about my grandchildren? I asked. What happens to them? Their father will retain custody unless he's found to be complicit. There's no evidence of that so far. But Mrs. Whitmore, you need to understand after your daughter is arrested, you may never have a relationship with those children again. Derek will likely prevent contact, and once they're old enough to understand, they may blame you for their mother's imprisonment. Another loss. Another price to pay for the crime of surviving my daughter's murder attempts. After the officers left, I sat in my living room with all the lights on, watching the camera feeds on my tablet. My home, my sanctuary for 33 years, had become a fortress, and I was under siege from my own flesh and blood. My phone rang at 7 in the morning. Marcus Webb, his voice urgent. Margaret, the DA is executing the arrest warrant today. They're going to Rachel's house at noon. She'll be taken into custody, and there will be a bail hearing tomorrow. I need you to be prepared for phone calls. The media will find you quickly. Okay, I said, my voice hollow. There's one more thing. The toxicology report came back from the wine glass. I thought they didn't have the wine. They didn't, but the DA subpoenaed the restaurant's trash from that night. It took days, but they found the bottle of Merlot that your wine came from. There were sediment traces in the bottom that didn't match the wine. My heart was pounding. What was it? A combination of crushed zolpidem, that's Ambien, and diazepam Valium. In the concentration that was in that glass, if you'd consumed the full amount, it would have been enough to cause respiratory depression, especially given your age and size. Combined with the wine itself, which amplifies the effect of CDAT IVEs ... I would have died. I finished. Most likely, yes. You would have appeared to have simply gone to sleep and stopped breathing. It would have looked like natural causes. Elderly woman has too much to drink with her sleep medication. Tragic accident. So that had been Rachel's plan. A foolproof murder disguised as an accident. The DA wants you to testify at the bail hearing, Marcus continued. They want to argue that Rachel is a danger to you and should be held without bail. Are you willing to do that? Was I willing to stand in front of a judge and testify that my daughter had tried to murder me? Was I willing to look Rachel in the eye and tell the truth? I thought about Emma and Lucas. I thought about the life I'd imagined, growing old with grandchildren who visited on holidays and called me on my birthday. I thought about everything I was about to lose. But then I thought about David and what he would say if he were here. David, who'd loved Rachel, but who'd also taught her that actions had consequences. David, who would never have let anyone hurt me, not even his own daughter. Yes, I said, I'll testify. At exactly noon, I watched the news on my laptop. The arrest wasn't being televised yet. Rachel wasn't famous enough for live coverage, but I knew it was happening. I imagined squad cars pulling up to that beautiful house in Stamford, officers knocking on the door. Rachel's face when she realized this was real. My phone started ringing at 12:30. Local reporters, somehow already with my number. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen and waited. The headline appeared at 1:15. Connecticut woman arrested for attempted murder of elderly mother. There was a photo. Rachel in handcuffs, being led from her house. Her face was a mask of shock and fury. In the background, I could see Emma standing in the doorway, crying. I closed the laptop and finally, after 9 days of barely sleeping, I laid down on my couch and wept. The bail hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock the next morning at the Superior Court in Stamford. Gerald Hutchins met me in the parking lot, his hand steady on my elbow as we walked through a small crowd of reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. "Remember," Gerald said quietly as we entered the courthouse, "you're not on trial here. You're the victim. You tell the truth, clearly and calmly, and let the facts speak for themselves." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and fluorescent lit. I took a seat behind the prosecutor's table, and that's when I saw her. Rachel sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger and somehow more vulnerable. For a moment, she was just my daughter again, the girl who'd skinned her knee at age 7 and cried in my arms. Then she turned and looked at me, and the expression in her eyes wasn't remorse. It was pure, concentrated hatred. I looked away. The judge entered, a black woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison, who had a reputation for being fair but uncompromising. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Chun, stood to present his case. "Your Honor, the state is requesting that the defendant be held without bail. Rachel Walsh is charged with attempted murder, elder abuse, bank fraud, insurance fraud, and forgery. The evidence against her is substantial and includes digital forensics showing premeditation, eyewitness testimony, toxicology reports, and surveillance footage of the defendant attempting to unlawfully enter the victim's property." Rachel's attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Susan Brennan, stood immediately. "Your Honor, my client has no criminal record. She's a mother of 2 young children who need her. She has deep ties to the community and poses no flight risk. House arrest with an ankle monitor would be more than sufficient." Judge Morrison looked at the file in front of her, then directly at me. "I'd like to hear from the victim. Mrs. Whitmore, please approach the witness stand." My legs felt unsteady as I walked to the stand and was sworn in. I kept my eyes on the judge, avoiding Rachel's burning gaze. "Mrs. Whitmore," Ada Chun began gently, "can you describe the events of October 3rd? I told the story. The dinner at Marcello's, the waiter's warning, the wine I didn't drink that would have killed me. My voice remained steady, factual, almost detached. It was the only way I could get through it. And this wasn't the first incident, was it? No. There were others. Sleeping pills that made me dangerously ill. Strange symptoms after drinking tea she'd made. Pressure to sign legal documents. The forged power of attorney. How has this affected you, Mrs. Whitmore? I finally looked at Rachel. She was staring at the table now, her jaw clenched. My daughter tried to murder me for my money. She was willing to watch me die, to orphan her own children of their grandmother, to destroy everything our family was because she needed cash. I'm 68 years old, and I now sleep with a chair against my bedroom door. I have cameras in every room of my house. I'm afraid to drink anything I haven't poured myself. The person I loved most in the world wanted me dead, and I have to live with that knowledge every single day. My voice cracked on the last sentence. Ada Chun gave me a moment, then nodded to the judge. "No further questions, Your Honor." Susan Brennan stood for cross-examination, but her questions were gentle, almost perfunctory. She knew what the evidence showed. She was already planning for a plea deal, I could tell. Judge Morrison took only 5 minutes to deliberate. Given the severity of the charges, the evidence of premeditation, and the documented attempts by the defendant to access the victim's property after being confronted, I find that the defendant poses a clear and present danger. Bail is denied. The defendant will be held pending trial. The gavel came down. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes wild. "No, Your Honor, please, my children. Your children will be fine. Ms. Walsh, you should have thought about them before you attempted to murder your mother." Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Next case. As they led Rachel away, she turned to look at me one last time. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but could read on her lips. I hate you. I watched my daughter disappear through a side door and felt something inside me finally break clean through. The trial was set for 3 months later, but it never happened. 6 weeks after the bail hearing, Susan Brennan approached Ada Chan with a plea deal. Rachel would plead guilty to attempted murder, elder abuse, and fraud charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 15 to 25 years. Gerald called to tell me, "She's allocuting today at 2. The judge will likely accept the plea. Margaret, do you want to be there?" I thought about it. Thought about facing Rachel again, about hearing her admit what she'd done. "No," I said finally. "I don't need to see that." But I did attend the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, because Connecticut law allowed victims to give impact statements. The courtroom was packed this time. Derek was there with his parents, sitting as far from me as possible. Emma and Lucas weren't present too young, thank God, to witness this. Some of Rachel's friends had come, women I'd known for years who now looked at me with a mixture of pity and accusation, as if I were somehow responsible for their friend's imprisonment. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium with a prepared statement. But when I looked at Rachel, sitting there in her orange jumpsuit, thinner now and pale, I set the paper aside. "Rachel," I said, speaking directly to her, "I loved you from the moment you were born. I would have given you anything. If you'd told me you were in financial trouble, I would have helped you. I would have given you money, helped you restructure your debts, supported you in any way I could. All you had to do was ask." Rachel's face remained impassive, but I saw her hands clench in her lap. "Instead, you decided I was worth more dead than alive. You researched ways to kill me. You forged documents. You stole from me. You put poison in my wine and watched me reach for it. And even after you were caught, you tried to break into my home. You never once apologized. You never once showed remorse." My voice broke, but I pushed through. "I've lost my daughter. I've lost my grandchildren. Derek has made it clear I'll never see them again. I've lost the family I thought I had, the life I thought I was living. You didn't just try to take my life, Rachel. You took everything that made my life worth living." I paused, collecting myself. "Your Honor, I ask that you impose the maximum sentence, not out of revenge, but because I truly believe that if my daughter were released, she would try again. She's shown no remorse, no understanding of what she's done, and I can't spend what's left of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for her next attempt." Judge Morrison looked at Rachel. "Does the defendant wish to say anything before sentencing?" Rachel stood slowly. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might show some fragment of the daughter I'd raised. "I made mistakes," she said flatly, "but my mother is making this worse than it was. She's always been dramatic. She's keeping my children from me out of spite." Susan Brennan closed her eyes in apparent despair at her client's words. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "Ms. Walsh, you have shown absolutely no remorse for attempting to murder your own mother. You have shown no insight into your actions. The psychological evaluation indicates narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. In my 23 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty directed at a family member." She looked down at her paperwork. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years. On the charge of elder abuse, 10 years to run concurrently. On the fraud charges, 5 years also concurrent. With good behavior, you'll be eligible for parole in 17 years. The gavel struck. Rachel's face went white. 25 years. She'd be 67 when she was released, older than I was now. As they led her away, Rachel started screaming, a raw animal sound that echoed through the courtroom. "This is your fault. You did this to me. I hope you die alone." I sat very still until the courtroom cleared, until it was just me and Gerald. "She's going to appeal," he said quietly. "They always do. But with the guilty plea, her chances are minimal." "I know. Margaret, what are you going to do now?" It was a good question. "What did you do after your daughter went to prison for trying to murder you? How did you rebuild a life from that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "One day at a time, I suppose. That was 6 months ago. I'm sitting in my kitchen now, drinking coffee and watching the morning sun stream through the windows. The house is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet now rather than a fearful one. I've kept the security cameras, but I no longer check them obsessively. The chair is gone from in front of my bedroom door. Patricia stayed with me for 2 weeks after the sentencing, making sure I ate, making sure I got out of bed, making sure I kept living. My sister Linda flew up from Florida and stayed for a month. Slowly, with the help of people who actually loved me, I began to heal. I've started volunteering at a senior center, teaching a creative writing class. I've reconnected with old friends, joined a new book club, even started dating a widower named Henry who makes me laugh. I'm learning that my life can still have joy in it, even with the shadow of what happened. I think about Emma and Lucas every day. I wonder if they hate me, if Derek has told them their grandmother sent their mother to prison. I wonder if they'll ever want to know my side of the story. I've written them each a letter to be given to them when they turn 18. Explaining everything. Maybe they'll read them. Maybe they won't. I've also started speaking publicly about elder abuse. It turns out my story, as painful as it was to live through, has helped other people recognize warning signs in their own families. I've received dozens of emails from adult children of elderly parents who saw themselves in Rachel's behavior and got help before it went too far. If something positive can come from this nightmare, maybe it's that. There are hard days. Days when I see a blonde woman who looks like Rachel from behind and my heart stops. Days when I remember her as a little girl, trusting and sweet, and wonder where it all went wrong. Days when I miss my grandchildren so much it physically hurts. But there are also good days. Days when I wake up grateful to be alive. Days when I appreciate the friends who stood by me, the strangers who sent supportive messages, the simple fact of another sunrise. David's death taught me about grief. Rachel's betrayal taught me about survival. And now, at 69 years old, I'm learning about resilience. Last week, I did something I'd been putting off. I went through the photos on my refrigerator, the ones of Rachel through the years. I took them down, every single one, and put them in a box in the attic. Not to forget, I'll never forget, but to stop living in the past. In their place, I put new photos. Pictures of Patricia and me at a local art show. Linda and me laughing on her visit. Henry and me at a restaurant. The same restaurant where this all began, actually. I'd been nervous about going back to Marcello's, but Henry had been patient and kind. And we'd sat at a different table, in a different part of the room, and I'd ordered sparkling water with lemon. The young waiter who'd saved my life doesn't work there anymore. I heard he's in graduate school now, studying to be a physician's assistant. I sent him a letter thanking him for his courage, for speaking up when he could have looked away. I never got a response, but I hope he knows what he did mattered. My attorney says Rachel's first appeal was denied. She'll try again in a few years. I don't think about it much anymore. She made her choices. She lives with the consequences. And I'm finally, truly living my life. If there's anything I want people to understand from my story, it's this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if someone's behavior doesn't make sense, if you feel unsafe even with someone you love, listen to that feeling. I ignored warning signs for too long because I couldn't imagine my own daughter would harm me. I wanted so badly to believe the best of her that I nearly died for it. But I also want people to know that survival is possible. Healing is possible. Even after the worst betrayal imaginable, life can still be beautiful. It's different now, quieter, more careful, perhaps sadder in some ways, but it's mine. And every morning I wake up in this house, in this life I fought to keep, is a small victory. I'm Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 69 years old. My daughter tried to murder me, and I survived. And I'm still here, still fighting, still choosing to believe that the world holds more kindness than cruelty. Most days, I'm even right about that. If you've experienced something similar, family betrayal, elder abuse, feeling unsafe with people you trust, please know you're not alone. Speak up. Ask for help. Trust the people who warn you, even when the truth is hard to hear. Your life is worth protecting, no matter who's threatening it. And if you're watching because you found this story compelling or because you've learned something from it, I hope you'll share it. The more we talk about these issues, the more people we can help. Elder abuse thrives in silence, so let's not be silent anymore.